Welcome back to another episode of Conservative Conversations with your host, Reid and Frank. How are you today, Frank?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I kind of fumbled that up a little.
It's all
Sound like
right.
Joe Biden.
It's all right. Everything gets a little fumbled every now and then.
That's right. And we are coming at you live from our new office/studio space in our basement, listeners.
Yeah, it's still in the works, but
That's right.
it's coming along.
It is. So, we'll go ahead and apologize for any audio quality as we get settled in. We'll probably be moving around and putting up, stuff to help with soundproofing and all that good things. But we're going to go ahead and jump right into the news, and I think Frank's going to kick it off with the most breaking story.
Well, I know what I woke up to this morning and saw the most of was this, story about how the FBI just raided Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, while he was out of town up in New York, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was pretty interesting. I heard a lot about it this morning as I was having my coffee and everything.
Yeah. Everybody's talking about it.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting how, it seems to fit a mold too, where this is how they got, what's his name? Oliver Stone. That's how they got Oliver Stone too, was they waited till like the last minute.
I think you mean Roger Stone.
Yeah, what did I say?
Oliver Stone? I think
right.
that's like a director or writer or something.
All right, so Roger Stone. That's how they got Roger Stone too. And then they just got somebody else, like maybe his lawyer, like Pat Cipollone or somebody. They got him like in the airport while he was about to go on vacation or whatever. So I just think it sort of fits that they'd wait until he was out of town. And then from what I understand, it doesn't sound like they even found anything. So it's sort of like, why even do this anyway? It's almost like it's just a stunt.
Well, one of the things I've definitely heard is supposed to be about, like classified documents and, records and stuff. He was poorly keeping records and classified material at his estate, and, he supposedly was told about this before or something like that.
Yeah.
Which, just on that alone, doesn't sound like it really warrants, no pun intended, a raid on his home. I feel like they could politely show up and say, we need those documents if indeed, he is supposed to hand them over. So this is a little...
Well, they're always saying that they don't want to prosecute people. Like, if you look back at what Comey did and what he said about Hillary Clinton,
right?
He came out and basically said that she had broken the law.
Right, yeah.
But then he said, we're not going to prosecute her because this is all too political and blah, blah, blah. It's a political cycle right now.
Right.
Well, what are they doing here?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I mean, the reason we would bring this up and I would pick this as a topic is because we've known what they're doing with this January 6th commission and everything that they're trying to do. They're trying to just make it so that he's unelectable or somehow tainted or has some kind of charge filed against him that makes it so that he's ineligible to run as president.
Right.
So,
yeah, I've heard some people say this seems more like a fishing exploration, trying to find stuff related to January 6th or whatever, rather than actually having a valid reason to be there.
To go raid his home and whatever about these documents and whatever. What's it matter? I see a sort of tie-in. I saw another headline very recently that said that at CPAC, which has just recently been going on.
Yeah.
He won some sort of straw poll that said that 69% of voters, at least in this poll or whatever, respondents or whatever, wanted him, or it said that they would vote for him. 69% of the people at CPAC.
Right.
And, if you're looking at the January 6th commission or whatever, there's no Republicans on that commission, no true Republicans or anything.
Right.
So, I mean, this whole effort, the whole thing is a sham. It's not bipartisan. It's the people who are participating in it are not fair.
Right. Yeah.
And then here's the FBI doing their dirty work and going and, like I made a joke in the warm up, it's like they're doing a panty raid on Melania.
Right. Yeah. Meanwhile, they're not investigating this. I already forgot his name. The doctor for the Olympic athletes, these gymnasts.
Okay.
That he was.
Yeah, supposedly touching
Yeah,
girls and stuff like that.
Right
Yeah.
after hundreds and hundreds of complaints, they drag their feet on investigating him.
Yep.
But they got time to go raid the former president's house while he's gone.
When it's like this on everything, I mean, it's a sad comparison, and I don't mean to just beat a dead horse or anything, but people knew about Jeffrey Epstein forever. People knew about Harvey Weinstein forever. People knew about Bill and Hillary Clinton. I mean, there's how many times do we have to know these things, before people just acknowledge what we all know?
Right.
And the FBI is not fair.
No.
They haven't been fair. They're not neutral.
No.
Here they are once again putting their thumb on the scales, basically trying to make this guy seem unelectable or whatever, like he's under investigation.
Right. They're being political actors instead of independent law enforcement agents.
Yep.
They enforce what laws they want to enforce against who they want to enforce them.
Yep. And it all seems to go one way.
Right. Yeah, when they going to raid some prominent Democrat's house?
Probably never.
Right.
Anytime anything happens to one of them, they just go missing. They get Clinton-sided.
Right. Yeah, and I don't really have, I was going to say I don't have too many opinions, but I guess I kind of do. But a couple, a lot of the headlines I've seen is pushing a lot of fear surrounding this raid, which I guess is understandable in some sense. But
you mean like who could they come after next?
Right.
Like maybe it's you. Like
that, and it's, I guess, fear of furthering political divide, and I guess the idea of the potential civil war that people have talked about for years now. But I don't really quite feel it. I mean, I guess some people might. I think it's definitely terrible. I don't want to get that mistaken. I think this is, like others have probably said already, that if the FBI doesn't have a really good reason for this, then it's definitely bad. I don't like it. But I don't really quite feel any of the fear that some commentators are, suggesting.
Well, some people I know went through the history of the FBI, and it's interesting. It wasn't a thing until World War I.
Right. Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to have the clearest track record.
Right.
And then even there are people on the record like Ron Paul, the first person I ever voted for, talking about the FBI and its track record for abuses, like basically just for spying on the American citizenry.
Right.
And, they'll go on. Ron Paul goes on to say that the CIA is even worse and they're younger.
Right.
And it's all part of this modern thing where we just keep giving government the power to solve all of our problems, and we keep losing our power over and over. These institutions that are supposed to protect us or whatever. See, the thing I always thought about the FBI is I thought they were there to for kidnappings and stuff because of the Lindbergh baby.
Right.
That's what I associate with the FBI.
Yeah.
The Lindbergh baby. But apparently that's not exactly true. That's not right. They didn't come about because of kidnappings. So, I don't know, It's interesting, but apparently they've always been sort of a tool against us.
Well, it's I don't know if you want to call him the founder, but its original leader, J. Edgar Hoover, certainly had no...
Jedgar?
Yeah, Jedgar. He certainly had no good reputation, so it's certainly not a surprise.
Well, of course.
It's almost to be expected, I would say.
Yeah, he was a thug.
Uh-huh. Well, I remember listening to a podcast series. It was probably one of the ones I like from the Wondery podcast network.
Yeah.
Where in the 50s and 60s, I think, or around that time, there was a whole show about the FBI that they had on the TV, trying to get people to be more warm to the idea of the FBI, or have a more positive idea, a positive, what's the word?
Yeah, I don't know.
Opinion.
Yeah, there you go.
Positive opinion of the FBI. And I assume they would only do that because they don't have that good of a reputation, and it's been that way for, it seems like its whole existence.
Well, I always love, we were just sort of alluding to it, but that old Lily Tomlin routine where she's pretending to work for the telephone company. And there's one where she calls up, she talks to Jedgar Hoover. And she tells him, she says, I don't understand you guys and why you issue all these warrants to get wiretaps on people. And she's like, you could just ask the phone company. We have it all already.
Right.
Oh, man. She was funny.
Yeah.
And that was a different time, but...
Right.
But it's the same kind of thing. All these taps and abuses on our rights and everything, so...
Yeah, there definitely needs to be some reform. I've heard people call for the abolishment of the FBI, but I think at its core...
Marjorie Taylor Greene just did. She said something like defund the FBI.
I think at its core it kind of has a purpose. There are interstate crimes, and that's one of the main areas where they usually step in. And I feel like getting rid of it and replace it with a new agency isn't going to do anything. It's just going to be the same agency, new letters. So I don't really know if I would call for its entire abolishment, but it certainly needs some fixing. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well,
is that all you got for that topic?
Yeah, it is.
All right, then my first topic that I have picked out that heard a little bit about recently is since the Dobbs decision, there has been an increase in females seeking sterilization, or colloquially getting their tubes tied. And
is that the same thing? Because getting your tube tied can be reversed, as I understand.
Nope. I have here, straight from Mayo Clinic, the most common form of female sterilization is tubular ligation, also known as getting your tubes tied. And I'll do my best to read back the notes here that I got. It's a type of permanent birth control. During tubal ligation, the fallopian tubes are cut, tied, or blocked to permanently prevent pregnancy. Tubal ligation can be done at any time, including after childbirth or in combination with other abdominal surgeries, such as a C-section. Most procedures cannot be reversed. If reversal is attempted, it requires major surgery and is not always effective, which surprised me, because just like you, I was under the impression of getting your tubes tied, as they say, was reversible. So to hear that a lot of women, particularly young women, are going out and having this done is, I don't know, not necessarily upsetting, but shocking and kind of sad in some way. I mean, if somebody definitely doesn't want to have kids, I guess that's fine and all, but I would assume, just like how, some young women are misled on what abortions are, they're misled on what this procedure is, and they get it done, and later decide that they want to have kids, but now they can't.
I totally understand, because who knows what life's going to throw at you.
Yeah.
And just, imagine at, let's say, 40, you find your sweetheart after all these years, and you're ready to settle down, and then it's like, no, honey, I can't have kids because when I was 22 years old, as part of a political statement, I got my tubes tied.
Yeah.
That would just suck. It's like
right.
ruining the whole, the whole opportunity or possibility
right.
to ever use such an ability.
Right.
Just because, you're 22 and you're politically active? Good for you, sweetheart.
Right. Well, I think there's, a few different things with this story. One, I think it's an admission of how much abortions were used as birth control. Now that
interesting,
becoming more common in places, particularly in places that are that have more abortion restrictions. And if this is what you're resorting to control your birth control, just after your option of abortion is taken away, I feel like that does suggest that was your maybe not your primary method, but that's why you were getting one, was simply for birth control, which
I get it. That
terrible.
Makes sense. Because if you have in the back of your mind, well, I could always have it taken care of.
Right.
But now you don't.
Right.
Yeah. Now it's like, oh, well, I'd better get out ahead of this.
Yeah.
That is really sad. And I totally understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. And one, I would rather, if I had to pick between the two, I suppose I'd rather have a woman get her tubes tied than go around killing babies every time she has one. But still, I'm certainly not a woman, and nor ever will I be, but you're removing your ability to have kids, which is like the thing that makes you a woman.
In a way, it's comparable to like suicide or this like transforming your body, like the transgender thing or whatever, because it's like a permanent decision. What do they say? A permanent,
irreversible?
No, they say
procedure,
like a permanent decision for a temporary problem.
Oh yes, temporary solution.
Yeah, temporary solution to a temporary problem or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
So, but it is. Like aborting a kid is permanent.
Mm-hmm.
You can't ever undo that.
Yep.
Tying your tubes is maybe permanent. You can't easily undo that.
Right.
Changing your gender can't really be undone. You can't easily do that.
Right.
And what kind of harm are you doing to yourself in all these situations?
Right. Instead of just, telling our society there's sacrifices you might have to make, such as abstinence or using other various types of birth control, they just, then once you get your abortions, if that doesn't work, get your tube tied. It's no problem.
We'll just bill Medicare for it. Why not? Or Medicaid.
Right.
Whoever. Somebody else will pay that bill, honey. Don't worry about it. Don't you worry about it.
And it's no sweat off your back. You gotta go climb that corporate ladder, or you're gonna miss your opportunity.
Yeah. Damn.
It's a sad state. Hopefully, I assume these pregnancy resource centers that are being terrorized by these abortion advocates, abortion terrorists, really. Hopefully, they'll help educate women on what sterilization is, as well as abortion, since that seems like it could become an increasing problem. If one might think it's a problem. I do.
Well, they'll figure out it's a problem eventually.
Yeah.
I mean, I always think about that. These transgenders, these women who are making these permanent decisions at 22, some of them 18 years old.
Even younger.
I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, think of how they're going to be, how they're going to look, how they're going to feel, how they're going to act and behave when they're 40, if they make it till 40.
Right. Yeah.
Some of them are dying of massive heart attacks because of all these multiple surgeries. They basically have open wounds all the time that don't heal very well, that get infected.
Right.
I mean, it's really crazy stuff that we're talking about.
Right. Well, I mean, the story, I forget the lady's first name. Her last name was Nugent. She was in Matt Walsh's What is a Woman documentary, who had transitioned to appear as a male, as she said herself.
Yeah.
I feel like she's like the perfect story of what tragedy happens to these people.
Yeah, but it's not only that, though. Yes, I mean, there's lots of these stories. But just on the whole of it, women are not supposed to take testosterone. They're already predisposed towards osteoporosis.
Right.
Then you go pumping this testosterone chemical drug into their body, and it's only going to cause negative ramifications for all of them. They're all women.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, in Matt Walsh's documentary, when he was talking to a pediatrician, she said there was a 14-year-old that had osteoporosis because of this stuff.
So then you just sit and wonder, what are these people going to look like? When they're 40, they're going to look like they're 60. They're going to be overweight. They're not going to be able to move. They're going to be bedridden. They're going to be wheelchair bound. They're going to be on these mobility scooters.
Yeah. It's terrible.
It is.
Terrible.
It really is.
But, yeah, it's hopefully to wrap it up with the sterilization. That's a tough word for me for some reason. Hopefully it won't become a big issue, because it'd be awful for women for generations and generations to, find it a norm to prevent themselves from ever having children.
Well, in a weird way, if I can add,
Sure.
I know we should be like moving on or whatever, but they always want to cite and talk about that Handmaid's Tale. Like, have you ever watched any of that? Are you very familiar with it?
I've heard of it for sure. I don't know too much about it.
Well, it's this like dystopian fiction where like the women of tomorrow aren't really able to have kids, and so the men like there's like this whole system where they keep the women and they sort them and organize them by who is most fertile and who could have children. And that's like the whole way the society's set up, is like all the women are like basically just supposed to be for having babies, because the ability to have babies is like something all women are having trouble with it in the future. So if somebody actually like is a woman and can have a baby, that's like kept precious and sacred, and they're, they try to find those women.
Right.
Well, I bring this up because it's almost like they're trying to create this future themselves.
Right.
And they always talk about it. They're always like, oh, it's going to be just like the Handmaid's Tale.
Yep.
But then here they are cutting out their ovaries and making it so that none of them have this ability to reproduce.
Right.
And it's like the self-fulfilling prophecy. Because it's like, of course, don't you think the ability to procreate is going to matter?
Right.
And
Yeah.
then they say, oh, you're just trying to make it like The Handmaid's Tale. No, aren't you?
Yeah.
And isn't that just like most of the Democrats and the liberal Looney Tune thinkers?
Right.
They're just doing what they say. It's the opposite.
Right,
It's always the
always.
opposite of what they say.
Right. It is always the opposite.
It's always the opposite.
Well,
All right.
I guess with that, I think you're up next.
Yeah, I have this thing about, Nancy Pelosi.
Uh-huh.
She just recently took a trip abroad,
Yep.
even though she is abroad. She's a broad who went abroad.
Abroad.
And it ticked a lot of people off.
Sure did.
Ticked off China quite a
Oh,
bit.
yeah, big time.
What's his name?
Xi Jinping.
Xi Jinping, yeah. Xi Jinping? Xi
I don't know.
Jinping.
I don't care.
Yeah. It's got some X's in it. It's different. So they got pretty mad.
Yep.
What do you think about all that?
I don't really know.
You know, at one point they said they were going to shoot her plane down.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really feel like I've formed any kind of particular opinion about her going over there or not. I know some conservatives were for it, some were against it. But I guess I don't really feel either way about it. I mean, after deciding to go there, I'm glad she didn't kowtow to China's threats. I don't think that necessarily would have been good, but I do.
Well, she's kind of standing up to Biden in a way too,
right. The people even on the conservative side who I've heard weren't really for her trip over there said she's kind of like, poking the bear, which I can see that, and it seems to be because already since she's left, China has increased its military activity just off the coast of Taiwan, which they weren't necessarily doing as much prior to. So I get that, but like I said, once she said she was gonna go and China started making threats and all that, I'm glad she stuck to it, at least.
but it's more than just the military activity and all that. They withdrew from climate talks and other things we were supposed to be doing with them that we were
right, and they've sanctioned Pelosi and her family or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And plus there's the broader question of how do other nations see this? Sure, I mean maybe our relationship with China or Taiwan or whatever, these other nations hasn't changed that much, but I've seen some articles out there, some pieces by some foreign outlets, and it's just more of the Biden's a joke kind of stuff. He's embarrassing, and he doesn't have a backbone or a spine, and maybe Pelosi does, but he doesn't.
Right.
And so in a way it's almost just like a pretense for relations to get worse between us. And
Right.
Biden kind of knew that was going to happen, and it's going to happen. And they had this divided front, where the House is doing its own thing and the White House is doing
Right.
its own thing. And
Uh-huh.
I don't know. So
Yeah, I don't either, because some of the other points I've heard is, if China's going to start really ramping up their activity, we're not in the position to keep helping out Ukraine fight Russia and then go deal with China and Taiwan at the same time. We're too much bread, too little butter.
surely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what took down Rome.
Yeah. I mean, our military is already having trouble recruiting. Though they're pushing hard to get a certain number of recruits by the end of September before the government's fiscal year ends, and they're struggling.
Well, and it's going to keep getting harder. Where are they going to get
Yeah.
boys with all these girls cutting their wombs out and
Right.
taking testosterone?
Right? And all these,
We're ruined, man.
right? I mean, they're putting out, the military's putting out ads, promoting Pride Month and all that, and most of the people who volunteer for the military aren't for that stuff. So they're turning away their own base, if you will.
Which, just like I've been saying, it's everything. The ad council for years,
Yeah.
they take our money and tell us to wear seatbelts.
Uh-huh.
How would I be listening to the radio if I didn't know how to keep myself alive?
Right,
You have to take my money and tell me to wear a seatbelt?
right.
I mean, the whole thing is like moronic, all of it, all the time.
Right.
Every part of it.
Yeah, so I don't really know what to think about China. I mean, I easily predicted it. I think anybody could have predicted it, but if you go back and listen to our 2022 predictions episode, I said I was pretty sure China would increase their activity, and sure enough, they are.
We're headed right into a sort of war with them.
Yep.
You might say
Seems
in a way, and for a while, that we've been in sort of a cold war with them, but it seems to be heating up.
Yep. It does seem so. It's hard to tell what's going to come of them in the next few months and years.
Well, we'll have to keep our eyes open and our ear to the ground about that and
Right.
give the people any updates we find.
Well, I mean, unless the big guy is going to sweet talk Mr. Ping.
You mean Mr. 10%?
Yeah, the big guy. I don't foresee them, China, backing off anytime soon. And Biden's still got 2 more years left. Possibly.
But he's already a lame duck, basically.
Well, yeah, he's a lame duck, but I'm saying that
And that's supposed to get worse.
Right,
His hands are going to be tied.
That's
man.
basically what I'm saying. I don't think anything's going to get better while he's still in office. The China situation, the Russia situation, the economy, I do not see anything getting better in the short term.
Yeah, but that's better for him. I don't think it's going to be getting better for us either. It's terrible. Even
Yeah.
if we take back the house and everything, because he's still the puppet who's up there, on stage.
Right.
And it doesn't really matter what we pump out of the Congress if he's the dummy who's leading the band or whatever,
Right.
gets the spotlight. It's horrible.
Yeah, and I feel like that kind of leads into my next topic. Part of the tie-in is we were talking about China and Taiwan particularly, and other countries in the region over there are primary manufacturers of our semiconductors or computer chips that we use in pretty much everything throughout our daily lives.
Well, and you and I both know that that's a big reason why Pelosi was over there too. Because of that deal.
Right. Well, there's sort of has been a, the chip shortage going on during this whole time. Partly due to, COVID lockdowns, all the factories that made the chips, were shut down for a period of time and all that. And then just recently, I heard a story about how we're about to experience the second wave of the chip shortage because one of the main components in making these chips which
Potatoes?
no,
Just kidding.
these silicon wafer chips that is used to make the the computer chips, that's why we call them chips,
Right.
is when they use the lasers to etch the silicon, they use neon gas. And over 50% of the world's neon gas is produced in Ukraine. And
I'll be a monkey's uncle
And most of the factories that produce this neon gas in Ukraine are in two major cities.
Kiev
No.
and oh,
Uh,
I tried.
It's Mariupol and Odessa.
Oh, Odessa.
Yeah. So without the neon gas to using the lasers that etch these semiconductors, you can't make them. And, as we all know, Ukraine is in the middle of a big war with Russia, and those two cities have been bombed heavily. And I believe in the story I heard, they're not even producing neon right now. So luckily, for now, semiconductor manufacturers have extra supply of neon, and the other manufacturers of neon have supply. But given that more than half of it is produced in this one area, it's going to cause an even greater shortage, which eventually is going to funnel down to, increased prices on the various products that these chips go into, which you can't even throw a baseball 2 inches without hitting something that's got one of these computer chips in it.
Yeah.
So I suspect, you're going to see even higher cost on the goods that use these chips, because eventually, as they're trying to make the products that these chips are for, if they run out of their supply, they gotta stop and wait until they get more in, which also is going to lead to more. You want to take a guess?
Inflation.
Yes, because inflation, one of the definitions of inflation is too many dollars going after too few goods. And when the government's pumping money into the economy and there's not enough products to be bought with those dollars, the prices go up more. So
Hey, I really need a new laptop. Can you tell me how many are there available? Well, sir, there's only one. I really need it right now. What price are you asking? I'm asking.
$1,000.
I'll give you 1,010. I need that laptop right now. Sir, this gentleman just bid $1 million. Are you willing to pay $1 million?
I mean, that's basically the idea of what's going to happen. Not literally, but yeah. I mean, that's usually what happens with inflation, because as we'll probably mention further, is when there's lots of money just floating around, like when the government paid us these big checks during COVID.
I didn't get a big check.
And these, people had more money than they knew what to do with at the time, and they just had to go out and spend it during the time we were having all these, product shortages.
What new couch?
So I thought that, this new chip shortage was a pretty interesting story, especially because I certainly didn't know that half the world's neon was made in the Ukraine.
No, that's truly interesting.
Yeah, and I really didn't even know neon was used in producing these chips, so
Well, who would have ever guessed? I mean, of all the elements.
Right.
Why
You
not
learn
argon? Xenon.
Right. Well, I mean, another thing I learned was we potentially could produce our own neon here, and I'm sure there might be a couple of places that do, because I forget exactly, and I'll have a link to the podcast where I heard the story, that a lot of neon gas is collected from producing steel, and we got some steel factories here.
Pittsburgh, PA.
Exactly. So I don't know if this CHIPS Act, which I'll go ahead and what's my other story, so I'll go ahead and plug it in now. I don't know if it includes any kind of provisions to making or producing neon here for these semiconductors, because
Well, and what did they spend on it, on the
Right.
CHIPS Act? You said you were going to tell me
yep,
that figure.
I looked it up. It's supposedly about a $280 bill for
280 million?
billion.
Billion.
Yeah, $280 billion.
Million. What kind of idiot am I to speak in millions?
Right, we've already gotten halfway through 10 trillion, so millions are nothing anymore.
Yeah. What
We only speak in billions in our government
That's
now.
right. I forgot. I must think it's 1992 still.
Yep. But yeah, a $280 billion bill that they passed, this Chips and Science Act, which I believe as we record today on August 9th, the president signed today or yesterday, just recently,
The anti-inflation bill.
right?
The quote-unquote
And-
Inflation Reduction Act.
Right, and that was sort of my next tie-in.
Mine
That's-
too.
That's right on top of this.
Well, the only other thing I wanted to add about the CHIPS
Yeah,
thing,
go
if
for
I may, is not only is that the California Highway Patrol, which I just happened to think of,
Yeah.
but as I recall, there was another big headline recently about, what's her name?
Pelosi?
Yeah, what's his name?
Paul.
Making a bunch of money on this CHIPS stuff.
Oh,
In the
no
stock market.
surprise. I believe it.
So we have him making a bunch of money in the stock market. We have her going overseas, causing a big fuss to do this chips manufacturing, which she knew all about.
Right.
Right? I mean, all this stuff just goes hand in hand. And then they've got to hurry up and pump out this quote-unquote Inflation Reduction Act because they're creating all the inflation.
Right.
And what do you want to tell the people what you and I both realized right before we came on air and while we were talking about this bill?
You can tell him because I'm not quite sure exactly what you're referring
Well, it's
to.
only about a $400 billion bill.
Oh, yes.
That's
yes,
it.
just
It's
under.
only about $400 billion. And $369 billion out of this bill goes towards climate change acts.
Right. So,
The rest of it's all just changing a few laws, tweaking a few things, doing some sort of in-name only sort of exercises.
Right.
And the rest of it's just a green package.
Right.
It's like the Green New Deal with some tweaks to it.
Right. I don't know how anybody can even look at it and think it's going to reduce inflation. Like, what in it is supposed to reduce inflation?
Well, you know, Joe Manchin, he's been out there saying
Yeah.
it's supposedly it's an American bill.
Oh, yeah.
And it is going to bring down inflation, and it's...
Right. Speaking of Joe Manchin, it's disappointing that he caved on it. Really.
Yeah, because it is a spending bill, no matter how you slice the pie.
Right. And especially for people who are from West Virginia, well, at least speaking for myself, Frank here's from West Virginia too, but
Yep.
as somebody who's from West Virginia, he had been doing really well, and it was nice to see him stand up to the rest of the Democrats, Chuck Schumer, and then to watch him just cave on this, it's just,
I said it's because they put his name on it.
I didn't
It's
hear
like
that.
it's like the Manchin-Schumer bill. They call it something like that, the Manchin-Schumer Act
Huh.
or whatever. That's what the common name of the bill is.
Huh. Well, it's, what was I trying to say at the same time?
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's okay. What was it? Well, he had been standing up against the Democrats and Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
This whole time, he's been doing well, and then to watch him cave like this. Oh, yes, I was starting to say it shouldn't be disappointing because, he's a politician, and that's what politicians do. You shouldn't really expect much less. But, like I was saying, he'd been doing so well, it
Yeah,
seemed.
he was making us proud there for a
Right,
little while.
exactly. And part of what I've heard was he was supposedly promised, a bill to come up before the end of September to reform permittings for fossil fuel drillings and stuff like that
Yeah,
to
for
change
his
the
deer coal industry.
right, yeah, to change the permitting process for
Right.
approving projects like that. And it's a promise. It's not even guaranteed to Joe Manchin that they're going to bring this up. So it feels like he's got bamboozled just to
Yeah, because
try to
here,
get some kind of win.
I have the notes. I'm telling you,
for
I
it.
think it's a pride thing because they
Sure.
put his name on it.
Yeah.
So you get the $369 billion for climate change.
Mm-hmm.
Then this is the rest of the bill. Medicare can now negotiate drug prices.
Mm-hmm.
So they say that's going to save you a bunch of money,
Right.
but it doesn't account for any of the bill. None of the money of the bill
Right.
is accounted for in that.
Right. And before you move on, originally, when I first heard that part of the bill, that's originally what I thought might have been why Joe Manchin caved, because I don't know how many listeners might know this, but being from West Virginia, I'm aware that he and his family, I'm pretty sure his daughter and maybe even his wife, but certainly his daughter, works for Mylan Pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, his daughter, that came up years ago because
Uh-huh.
they were producing the EpiPen and they were charging outrageous amounts for the EpiPen, and there wasn't a knockoff version yet.
Right.
But anyway, because that went to Congress and everything, she went up and had to go to one of those show trials in the House that the House has.
Right. Yeah, but then when I heard he's supposedly going to get a bunch of money for a pipeline, then that made more sense to me of why he might have been another reason why he agreed to this bill. But go on. What else is
Sure.
in it?
Okay, so that's it. Medicare gets to negotiate drug prices. There's going to be a $2,000 cap on out-of-pocket expenses for Medicare. Okay, that's just change of a law.
Right.
They just changed a number on a form somewhere and effectively changed the law for this year going forward. Big deal. They extended the Obamacare protections for 3 more years. Just changed the law. No big deal. None of this has cost any money yet. And the last thing is they propose a 15% minimum tax on corporations. Just changes the law, changes future income. But otherwise, all the spending that comes out of this bill has nothing to do with healthcare, has nothing to do with quashing inflation. How do you quash inflation with more spending anyway?
You don't.
You don't. So the $400 billion in this bill is all for climate change.
Yeah.
This is a green bill.
Yep.
It's a spending bill.
Yep.
These other little 4 things that they changed in the law, they could have just changed those laws.
Right. And they're not even going to help with inflation, especially
They're not going to help at all.
especially that 15% minimum tax
On corporations.
Yeah.
Where is that tax going to get passed to?
downhill.
The consumers.
Yep.
So they've spent $400 billion more dollars
Right.
to give us 15% higher tax on all of our consumables.
Yep. Pretty much.
Of course, pretty much. You don't have to be. You don't
Right.
have to have a degree to read this. You don't. This is not a 15% tax on corporations. It's going to be effectively a 15% tax on us.
Right. I mean, the left would like to have people believe that, corporations pay their tax by the fat cat CEOs just writing a check out of their own pocketbooks or something like that. But that's not how it works. That money's coming from, the revenue they bring in from their business, their service or products that they sell, whatever it might be. And if they have to pay more to the government, that's less they can pay to their employees. That's less they can use for expanding their business to hire more employees. That's less they can use for innovating their manufacturing products to lower the cost for consumers.
Exactly.
And if they're not going to take that 15% out of the employees' paychecks, it's coming out of the consumers' pocketbooks.
Yep. One place we've seen it. It's been coming down the pike for a while.
Oh,
now.
yeah.
There were some people who were saying, this was only going to be transitory, this inflation. And what is inflation anyway? And we're so pampered and spoiled and everything that we can imagine long-term consequence. And here we are.
Right.
Everything's up. Price of chicken, price of gas, price of hamburger meat, price of bread.
And it's all just going to go up even more.
And it's predictable.
Yeah.
So let's tax corporations 15% more, huh?
Right.
Why not? Why not?
It'll be good for everybody.
Okay, so the last thing on the why not train.
Sure, let's hear it.
All right. You know this crazy woman, Liz Cheney?
I've heard of her.
You've heard of her?
I think so.
You know, the sad thing is, especially for an older woman, she's probably 40, 50.
Sure.
Somewhere 45, somewhere like that. She ain't ugly. She's not unattractive.
Sure.
But she is,
ugly souled.
She's crazy. She's crazy. I don't know what she's thinking.
Right.
And recently I heard a story about how she's sending out adverts to people about how they can switch from being Democrats to registering as Republicans just to vote for her.
Oh, it's funny that you say that because the whole time you're talking about Liz Cheney, a quote I heard, or not heard, but read in an article about her, she's Wyoming?
Right? I think so, yeah.
Somebody said that there aren't enough Democrats in Wyoming to vote for her.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, she wasn't trying to get Republicans to vote Democrat. She's trying to show Democrats how they can switch and vote Republican.
Right. Well, I mean, it still works.
There's
not enough Democrats to convince her to switch to Republican.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're building onto this little joke. Okay. Well, I couldn't believe it. I also happened to see the other day, I think they were showing it on Fox News. I walked into the break room at work, and she was doing this thing where she was playing Flip Cup or something. And she was trying to convince her people that she wasn't a flip-flopper, that she hadn't flipped on them or something like that.
By playing Flip Cup?
Yeah. Because it's all oxymoron. It's all the opposite of what they say.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, we said that earlier.
Yes. So that's why I wanted to end on that. This Liz Cheney thing where she's a big old flip-flopping, hypocrite, horrible person.
Right.
Yeah, you watch. She'll probably win, Reid. Because there's a big old buzz around her.
There's a big buzz around her?
Yeah.
Democrat buzz. That strange new respect for a Republican.
Hey, they love the ones they love.
Right.
They all go around in the same boat, around the sinkhole together. Round and round and round. They never seem to go down.
Yep. Well, I think that turd's going to get flushed soon.
We can hope. Well, that's all I had for the folks.
That's all I got, and I think that was a pretty good episode.
I think so. There's been some interesting things going on recently.
Oh, yeah. Big time, big time. It's,
They all sort of smell the same way.
Yeah. I mean, it's like one thing after another that, this administration is doing, and it all builds on top of each other. It's not just one thing. There's all these puzzle pieces that they're pushing out there that are making one big giant crap emoji.
The dookie. The turd.
And that crap emoji is actually just a big turd sitting right on top of America.
Yeah, no wonder I can smell it.
But as we said before, I'm still hopeful for the long term of our country. I don't foresee a Democrat getting in 2024, especially at this juncture. It's something, I feel like something tragic would have to happen for a Democrat to get in the office again after this bozo.
I pity the fool who votes Democrat.
That's right. But, folks, we hope you enjoyed this great episode. And be sure to tune in next time for another great conservative conversation. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and many other popular podcast platforms. And be sure to check out our other show, the Wicky Wacky Radio Show. You can find that wherever you get this show. And as always, be sure to check out our website for additional content, contemporaryconservative.net.
And as always, thanks for listening.